He tore the Bible from my hands and smiled. I am Martha, 56 years old, a widow who raised my brother's child as my own. For 30 years, the church had been my refuge, a place where wax and lilies smelled like forgiveness. Every Sunday, I arranged hymn sheets, dusted the pews, and whispered prayers that steadied my shaking hands. The sunlight spilled through stained glass, painting the walls in quiet faith. That morning began no differently, until he walked toward me. Daniel, my nephew, the boy I had fed, clothed, and defended from every cruel word. His voice carried across the sanctuary, calm but cold. "You always said truth mattered, Aunt Martha." The way he said it felt like accusation wrapped in scripture. Then he reached forward and wrenched the Bible from my hands. The congregation gasped. I heard a hymn falter mid-note. I could smell candle smoke in the air, faint and stubborn, as if the room itself hesitated to breathe. I remember thinking, faith shouldn't feel this heavy. He smiled then, not kind, not nervous, triumphant. "She's been hiding something," he said. "Ask her what she's done." I turned to the gatekeeper, the church's old record keeper who never missed a service. His pen hovered, unsure. "Daniel," I whispered, "this is a place of worship." But he stepped closer, his eyes sharp as glass. "Exactly," he said. "So tell them the truth." The pastor's voice trembled. "Now, Daniel, this isn't the way." "This is exactly the way," he cut in. "You preach honesty. Let's start here." I wanted to speak, to steady the trembling that had started in my chest, but my throat locked. Around me, the familiar faces, the women I'd prayed beside for years, looked away. Faith has strange mathematics. One accusation outweighs a lifetime of quiet service. The silence spread like smoke, curling against the high beams of the chapel. Someone closed a hymnal too loudly. The sound made me flinch. He said I stole what never belonged to me. The words landed like stones, and I felt the weight of every gaze. I thought of the evenings when I'd mended his clothes, the birthdays I'd baked for him, the nights I'd prayed for his father's soul. Every kindness twisted now into suspicion. My knees weakened, but I would not sit. Not yet. The pastor stepped forward, palms raised. "Let's calm ourselves. The Lord sees all." Daniel's laughter cut through his words. "Oh, he will. Wait until he reads the record." I saw the gatekeeper glance at the open attendance log on his desk, ink still fresh. He would mark the disruption there, a line of handwriting to prove this moment happened. I imagined it later. Sunday, service interrupted, accusation made, proof preserved. The scent of wax deepened as the candles burned lower. Somewhere a clock chimed 11, slow and mournful. The sanctuary felt smaller, the air thick with judgment. I looked at Daniel, his face, no longer the boy I'd known, but something older, wounded, and cruel. Betrayal has a face, and it wears the eyes of those you once trusted most. He turned toward the crowd, voice rising. "You think faith is free? Ask her what she did with Father's will. Ask her why I never saw it." His hand tightened around the Bible, pages bending under his grip. I stepped forward, but he pulled away, the sound of torn paper cutting the silence like a blade. "Stop this," I said softly. "You don't understand what you're doing." He looked at me, and for a brief moment I saw fear flicker there. Then pride swallowed it. "You're right," he said. "I finally understand what you did." Gasps filled the pews again. My heart beat too loudly. I could hear it echo in my ears. I reached for the Bible, but he held it high. "She's been stealing," he announced. "From the church, from family, from God." The pastor stepped forward again, voice firm now. "Enough. We'll handle this privately." But the word privately no longer meant safety. Daniel had made it public, and once faith becomes spectacle, there is no undoing. I could feel the old pew key in my pocket, the one that opened the church's storage drawer, small, tarnished, harmless. Yet at that moment, it felt like evidence. He looked at me one last time, his lips curling into that same sharp smile. "You taught me everything about truth," he said. "Let's see if it saves you." The church doors swung open, letting in a draft that carried the scent of rain. I stood still, every muscle tight, as he walked out holding the Bible like a trophy. The gatekeeper's pen scratched against paper. Somewhere behind me, a candle sputtered and died. And in that fading light, I felt something sacred tear within me. Faith, family, forgiveness, all unraveling into the same silence that would follow me home. They spoke my name as if it were a sin. After the service, the air in the chapel felt strange, too still, too heavy. I could hear the faint shuffle of feet, the muted hum of whispered words that didn't stop when I walked by. The scent of incense still clung to the pews, but beneath it lingered something sour, suspicion. Pinned to the chapel door, under the brass handle, fluttered an unsigned letter. The paper was thin and trembling, its edges curling from the damp. My fingers brushed it, and it crackled in protest. Each word was written with a deliberate, cruel hand, my name repeated 3 times, followed by a single accusation: falsifying donation accounts. My breath caught. The crowd's prayers hadn't yet faded, yet gossip had already found its sermon. "Someone had to say it," a woman murmured behind me. Another voice replied, "It's always the ones who seem most pious." Their words pressed against the back of my neck. I turned and met the eyes of the young chorister who'd sung the opening hymn that morning, The Witness. His lips parted as if to speak, but he only bowed his head and stepped aside. The boy I'd once praised for his honesty couldn't even meet my gaze. The sound of the church bell echoed, each toll louder than the last. It wasn't calling us to worship now, it was counting something down. I folded the letter in half, tucking it into my coat pocket, though it felt like fire in my hand. Outside, Daniel stood by the gate, speaking softly to a cluster of parishioners. His tone was calm, persuasive, the rhythm of someone who'd practiced his lines. Laughter followed whatever he said. I caught the tail end of a sentence. She had access to all of it. My heart thudded. He didn't look at me, but I knew he was aware I was listening. I stepped closer, my voice steady. "You seem busy spreading the gospel today." He turned slightly, that same faint smile from the sanctuary returning. "Only truth, Aunt Martha. Isn't that what you taught me?" For a moment, I saw the boy I'd raised, the child who once clung to my arm when thunder frightened him. Now his voice carried confidence sharp enough to cut glass. "You're playing a dangerous game," I whispered. He tilted his head. "Then maybe you shouldn't have dealt the cards." He walked away before I could answer, his footsteps echoing across the stones. Around me, conversation fractured into fragments. I heard there's an audit. Someone said the church funds went missing. Her own nephew knows the details. Faith had turned into arithmetic again, tallying guilt against reputation. Inside, I sat alone in the last pew. The candles flickered as if reluctant to stay lit. My rosary lay cold in my palm, beads like small bones. I whispered a prayer, not for forgiveness, but for strength. The paper in my pocket rustled softly, a reminder that my silence was already being read as confession. I unfolded the letter once more, searching for anything human in its script. An indentation, a scent, a clue. But all I found was precision, the kind of neatness only anger could produce. Somewhere within the ink was Daniel's echo, faint but unmistakable. He wanted ruin, and he'd chosen the one place that would believe him over me, the congregation. The witness approached quietly, stopping a few steps behind me. "I didn't write it," he said. "I know. They're saying the church will review the ledgers by tonight." "By tonight?" He nodded. "The gatekeeper already sent for the records." The bell tolled again, slower now. Evening was coming, and with it, judgment. I ran my thumb along the edge of the letter, feeling a small tear I hadn't noticed before. It split under the pressure, the sound sharp as betrayal. Faith has its own system of accounting. One accusation can erase decades of devotion. And as I sat beneath the stained glass that once felt like sunlight, I realized warmth can vanish faster than it's earned. By dusk, they would audit my soul. Numbers tell the story sinners hide. Morning light slipped across the church desk, pale and cold, catching the edges of the donation ledger. The pages looked harmless, lined, worn, filled with careful handwriting that wasn't quite mine. I traced a fingertip down the column of figures until I found it, a single line that broke the pattern. $12,400 withdrawn under my signature, the ink just slightly thicker, as if pressed by an unsteady hand trying too hard to imitate faith. I felt the paper's rough edge bite into my thumb. Betrayal has a texture, dry, fibrous, and patient. The ledger didn't lie. Someone else had written honesty into falsehood. I carried the book to the small office behind the nave, where the parish accountant, the protector in this storm, waited beside his briefcase. He was a quiet man, used to numbers that behaved. He adjusted his glasses. "You're certain you didn't authorize this?" "Certain." He turned the page. "The handwriting's close, too close." He laid two samples side by side, one mine, one the forgery. The imitation was flawless, except for the hesitation in the loop of the M. I'd learned to write with confidence over decades of donation receipts and attendance lists. Daniel's hand always trembled when he wanted something too badly. "He must have practiced," I said. "Or copied from a form," the protector replied. "This isn't casual fraud. Someone wanted precision." The word precision made my stomach tighten. It wasn't theft for gain. It was construction, deliberate and careful, as if my ruin were the goal, not the money itself. Outside the window, I could hear faint laughter from the courtyard. Life continued, hymns rehearsed, bells prepared for evening prayer. But inside, the silence was thick. The faint smell of wax lingered, an echo from Sunday's candles. The protector opened his briefcase and pulled out a bank receipt. Reference entry 06A21. "This is the corresponding withdrawal," he said. "It's dated 2 weeks after your brother's memorial fund was deposited. The signature matches this forged one." I looked closer. The curl of the letter R at the end of my name, the slant too steep. It was Daniel's. I taught him to write his name on Christmas cards, holding his little hand steady over the table. That memory struck me like confession whispered too late. He flipped through the pages again. "You know what this means?" "Yes," I said. He didn't just accuse me. He made it true on paper. We sat in silence for a moment, the ticking clock marking each second as another small verdict. My hands rested on the table, the edge of the ledger biting again, grounding me in something physical. Pain helped keep despair from drifting into disbelief. "I'll take this to the parish committee," he said. "They need to see it officially." "Do you trust them?" He hesitated. "Enough to start. But once numbers move, so do loyalties." He was right. Faith, like finance, had its investors. Some wanted salvation, others security. I watched him slip the documents into a brown envelope, sealing it with slow, careful pressure. The air in the room thickened. Even the light seemed to dim, as if unwilling to witness the exchange. "Keep a copy," he advised. "You'll need evidence when this reaches the diocese." The stakes were simple now. My reputation against his deceit, a ledger against a lie. If I lost, every hymn I'd sung, every hour I'd volunteered, would be rewritten into guilt. If I won, the cost would still be blood. When he left, I stayed behind, staring at the empty chair. The faint indentation on the seat looked like absence itself. I reached for a coin from the donation box, turning it between my fingers until the metal warmed. The inscription was faded, but the image of faith remained, a reminder that not all things could be forged. As I closed the ledger, the smell of ink clung to my fingertips. I could still see Daniel's face from that morning, confident, unflinching. He'd taken my faith and measured it in dollars, balanced his lies with my name. I whispered into the stillness, "If faith is arithmetic, then I'll make the numbers speak." The drawer smelled of cedar and deceit. It was the same desk I'd gifted my brother 20 years ago. Solid oak, varnished by hand, heavy as duty itself. After his passing, it became mine again, a relic of things once shared. That morning, I unlocked its top drawer, expecting dust and silence. Instead, I found an envelope, cream-colored, sealed with brittle wax, edges browned like secrets that had waited too long. The scent of cedar rose as I broke the seal. Inside lay a single sheet, folded twice. The paper was thin, faintly lined, its ink faded but legible. My hands trembled as I read his handwriting, each word carrying his familiar restraint. It was a fragment of his will, naming me as guardian of Daniel until his 21st birthday. My breath caught. He'd been 20 when his father died. The numbers collided in my head like confession and calculation. A single year's difference had rewritten everything. By law, by timing, by cunning, it meant the inheritance would revert, not to protection, but to possession. And someone had ensured that this page disappeared when the estate was settled. I folded it again, the scent of old ink clinging to my fingers. Betrayal had always been invisible until it touched paper. I went to the law office where my brother's affairs had been handled, carrying the fragment sealed in a new envelope. The receptionist led me to the same clerk who'd overseen the estate years ago, now older, cautious, but polite. The arbiter, as I would come to think of him. His tie was crooked, his tone careful. I placed the fragment on his desk. He adjusted his glasses. "Where did you find this?" "In a drawer I gave my brother. It shouldn't have been hidden." He skimmed the document once, then again, slower this time. "This clause doesn't exist in the official copy." "I know," I said quietly. "That's the problem." He leaned back, fingers steepled. "If this is genuine, it changes the distribution of the trust. Do you realize that?" "I realize it cost me more than money." He nodded. "I'll verify it. There should be a safe deposit file in storage. If it's been replaced, we'll know." We took the elevator down to the records vault, the air cold enough to hold breath hostage. Rows of boxes lined the shelves, labeled by year, each a silent witness. He pulled the one marked with my brother's name and opened it. Inside lay the official will, smooth, uncreased, perfect. Too perfect. He compared the two documents side by side. "The signatures match," he said, "but look here." His pen tapped the date, altered by a single numeral. "This one ends 2 years earlier than the fragment." 2 years, I whispered. That's how long Daniel waited to take everything. The arbiter frowned. If he, or someone else, filed a replacement, it's falsification. You'll need institutional proof. He slipped the fragment into a transparent sleeve marked reference A947. "This copy is now logged," he said. "You have evidence." Evidence. The word felt heavier than truth itself. On the walk out, the smell of cedar clung to my coat. I remembered the day I'd helped my brother move that desk into his study, laughing about how we'd grow old with too much paper and not enough space. I had no idea he'd buried my future inside it. Outside, the winter air bit at my face. I stood on the courthouse steps, staring at the sky's pale gray spread. Somewhere, Daniel was likely sleeping easy, his conscience lined with the comfort of stolen peace. But this paper, this fragment, was the first crack in his foundation. The arbiter called after me. "We'll need to question him formally once verification's complete." I nodded. "Do it quietly," I said. "For now, let him think the past still sleeps." He gave a small nod. "You're setting boundaries, I see." "Boundaries," I said, "and reminders." When I reached home, I placed the key from the drawer on my kitchen counter beside the fragment's copy. The metal was cold, but its meaning burned. Love once opened that drawer, now justice would. I ran my fingers over the paper's edge one last time and whispered to the air that still smelled faintly of cedar and loss. He'd stolen fatherhood itself. He asked if guilt could age a woman overnight. The question came from the doorway, his silhouette framed against the dim streetlight. The hour was late, too late for decency. I'd been sitting alone in the living room, curtains half drawn, the television whispering static more than sound. The mirror on the opposite wall caught his reflection first, fractured by the glass pane beside it. He looked older than I remembered, or maybe it was the malice that made him seem so. "I didn't invite you in," I said. He smirked. "You never had to. You left the door unlocked, as always." I hadn't. I knew I hadn't. Yet the latch hung loose, metal bent slightly as though it had been forced before. My pulse climbed. The air between us felt thin, the kind that carries arguments better than apologies. The light from the street poured through the window, making me visible while he stayed in shadow. "You should rest," I whispered. "We've both said enough." "No," he said. "You've said nothing. You hide behind those papers, those ledgers, pretending you're pure." His voice dropped, cruelly calm. "They all believe me now." The mirror caught the tremor in my hands. I hated that it did. "You're not here to talk," I said. "I'm here to remind you," he replied. "The truth can be edited." He took one step closer. The scent of rain clung to his coat, mixing with something metallic, like rust or fear left too long in the air. For a moment, his reflection overlapped mine, two faces in one frame, the accuser and the accused. I felt the world tilt towards something irreversible. "You forged the will," I said quietly. "I found the proof." He tilted his head. "Proof? You mean that old paper? They'll laugh at you. They'll call it sentimental fiction." "It's logged now," I said. "They already have a copy." His expression cracked just slightly, the smirk fading to something meaner. "Then you've declared war." He stepped closer again. "Daniel," I said, steady but trembling inside, "this isn't your home anymore." "Isn't it?" he murmured. "You think your little evidence will keep me out?" He looked around the room, the photos, the books, the faint glow of the lamp, and smiled like a trespasser who believed himself rightful heir. He brushed past me, his coat grazing my arm. The mirror rattled softly in its frame. "Get out," I said. He laughed once. "Call the police, Aunt Martha. Tell them I visited. Tell them you were afraid of me." He leaned in close enough that I could feel the warmth of his breath. "They'll note it, and they'll forget it." He left through the same door he'd broken in through, pulling it open so roughly that the frame cracked at the edge. The cold slipped in, brushing the floor like accusation. I stood still until the echo of his steps vanished. I called it in. My voice felt detached, as though the words belonged to someone braver. The dispatcher promised to send someone for a welfare check. When the gatekeeper officer arrived, his flashlight sliced through the darkness like judgment. He took down my statement, his pen tapping against a small notebook. "You said he forced entry?" "Yes, the latch is bent." "Any damage besides that?" "Just the door," I said, though what I wanted to add was, "and me." He examined the lock, the broken wood, the fingerprints likely smudged beyond value. "We'll file an incident report," he said. "Reference ID F23-1018. You'll get a copy by morning." I nodded. The light from his torch lingered across the mirror. My reflection looked pale, exhausted, a stranger in her own house. The officer paused before leaving. "He may come back," he said carefully. "Keep the door reinforced. If he does, don't engage. Just call." After he left, the silence returned thicker than before. I shut the door, wedging a chair against it. The metal edge of the latch pressed faintly into the wood, as if trying to remember strength. The room smelled faintly of dust and rain-soaked fabric. I looked again into the mirror. My face was half lit by the street lamp, half swallowed by shadow. "You will not take this house," I whispered. My reflection didn't answer, but for the first time, it looked like it believed me. Outside, A car passed, headlights sliding across the wall like ghosts of the past. I reached for the lock again, turning it until it clicked. The sound was small but final, a vow in metal. Then came the whisper through the crack of the door, soft, too soft to be certain. "Next time," he said, voice thin as smoke. "No door will stop me." The books whispered names I'd forgotten. I was called back to the parish on a gray afternoon, the kind where the light itself felt filtered through suspicion. The letter from the diocesan office had arrived 2 days earlier, its seal pressed so firmly it tore when I opened it. They wanted me to testify before the auditors, men who'd known my family for decades, men who'd shared bread at my table. Now they were investigators. The hallway leading to the inquiry chamber smelled faintly of old paper and disinfectant. At the end stood a long oak table, surrounded by ledgers stacked in careful order. The witness, the same young clerk who'd avoided my gaze weeks ago, was here again, standing near the panel, pen poised. His eyes flicked toward me, a mix of sympathy and warning. One of the auditors gestured for me to sit. "We appreciate your cooperation," he said, voice even, rehearsed. "I didn't have a choice," I replied. He nodded, pretending not to hear the tremor beneath my words. "We've reopened the books." He pushed the parish ledger toward me. The cover was new, its spine still stiff. I ran my hand across it. The texture was rougher than the last one, the kind that left faint impressions on the skin. Inside, neat handwriting filled every margin, notations, corrections, initials. At first glance, it looked diligent. Then I saw the letters. D.R. written beside every questionable entry. Daniel's mark. My throat tightened. "He was thorough," the auditor said. "Yes," I whispered. "He learned that from me." They asked about the missing funds again, $1,204, then another $8,000 later. I gave the same answers I'd given before. Each word felt heavier now, as if it had to fight its way through doubt already recorded in triplicate. The panel members nodded slowly, taking notes on paper embossed with the diocesan seal. The sound of their pens was steady, deliberate, like rain counting seconds. The witness stepped forward with a thin folder. "New documents were submitted this morning," he said. "They appear to reference the disputed donations." "By whom?" I asked. He hesitated. "By your nephew." I exhaled sharply. The room seemed smaller, the air dry. The lead auditor adjusted his glasses. "Your nephew claims he found receipts supporting the withdrawals. Reference memo C-118. He slid one across the table. The texture of the paper caught under my fingertip. It wasn't new. It smelled faintly of wax and time, as if aged to appear authentic. "That's not my signature," I said. "It's been authenticated," he replied. "By whom?" "By the same witness who authenticated the last ledger." The witness clerk looked down, guilt blooming across his face like bruises under light. "I only followed protocol," he said softly. "Protocol doesn't sign names," I answered. "People do." There was a pause, a long one. Somewhere, a clock ticked beyond the wall. The lead auditor cleared his throat. "Our role is not to assign blame. It's to ensure integrity." "Integrity?" I repeated. "You think ink and paper define it?" He frowned. "You're emotional, Mrs." He caught himself before finishing, remembering he wasn't to address me by name. "You must understand how it looks." I almost laughed. How it looks is exactly how he wants it. They asked me to confirm the dates, the entries, the supposed approvals. I did. Each denial entered into record like confession. When I finished, the head auditor gathered the papers into a neat stack. "We'll review all materials," he said. "The outcome will be communicated in writing." The witness placed the final document on the pile, a memo embossed with the church seal. I brushed a fingertip over it. The raised wax felt cold as stone, cold like faith when it's turned procedural. "Tell me one thing," I said quietly. "If truth lives in paper, what happens when the wrong hands hold the pen?" No one answered. As I left, the witness caught up with me at the door. "I didn't know he'd send those receipts," he murmured. You did, I said. You just didn't stop him. His silence was confirmation enough. Outside, the wind carried the faint chime of the church bell. 3 slow tolls, each one pulling at memory. I paused on the steps, the folder heavy in my hands. My life had become paperwork, every feeling flattened into an exhibit. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, tracing the outline of the diocesan seal embossed on the memo. The wax caught the light, smooth and flawless, like a coin polished by guilt. My thumb pressed against it until it cracked, a small, satisfying sound that no one else would hear. By morning, I decided, if they could use documents to build lies, I could use truth the same way. But for now, the official verdict waited on their table. They stamped it, pending review. He met me where roses once forgave everything. The garden had changed since spring, less bloom, more thorn. The night air carried the faint sweetness of decay, that mix of rain and cut stems. I'd chosen this place because memory softened even the sharpest truths here. But tonight, forgiveness had no seat among the petals. He arrived late, his footsteps steady, unhurried, the same rhythm he'd once used to walk beside me during Sunday mornings. The moonlight made his expression unreadable, half silvered and half shadowed. I could smell the roses even before I saw them, rich, overripe, their scent clinging like guilt. Beneath their arch, hidden in soil and leaves, a small recorder waited. Its red light blinked once, then disappeared into darkness. He stopped 3 paces away. "Still tending the garden?" he asked. "Some things don't die," I said. He smiled faintly. "Except people." My breath faltered. His tone carried the calm of someone who'd already decided how this would end. "You came to talk," I said. "Then talk." He leaned against the low stone wall, his hand brushing a thorned branch. "You ruined everything," he said softly. "You couldn't leave the past buried." "The past doesn't stay buried when it's been forged," I replied. He chuckled. "You should have died with him." The words hung between us like smoke, thick, poisonous, irreversible. Somewhere beyond the hedge, a wind chime trembled, its sound barely audible over my heartbeat. The recorder caught everything, the breath, the pause, the confession. "You took his desk, his house, his title," I whispered. "Now you want to erase his bloodline too?" He shrugged. "I only took what should have been mine. The rest was mercy." I wanted to move, to confront, but my body stayed still, rooted to the earth like one of the rose stems that refused to bend. "Mercy doesn't falsify wills," I said. "It corrects mistakes," he answered. He trusted the wrong guardian. For a moment, I thought the garden might swallow his words, the way it swallowed light at dusk. But the scent of the roses grew heavier, a cloying witness. My fear and resolve tangled in the same breath. Somewhere under the arch, the recorder blinked again, its silent eye watching justice unfold. "Does it comfort you?" I asked, "knowing you'll carry this lie forever?" He tilted his head. "I don't carry lies. I plant them." His smile widened. "And you're the soil that keeps them alive." The cruelty in his voice was familiar now. I had fed it for years through silence, but tonight, silence had a consequence. When he turned to leave, I said, "You won't walk away from this." He laughed. "No one will believe you." "They won't need to," I said. "Your voice already told them." He froze mid-step, half-turned, eyes narrowing. "What did you say?" I met his gaze, steady. "Every word you just spoke, recorded, time-stamped, sent before you arrived." He scanned the garden, panic flickering just behind his arrogance. "You wouldn't." "I did." "You don't even know what that means," he hissed. "You think truth can save you?" "Not save," I said. "Expose." He lunged forward, but the moment had already passed. A light cut across the hedges, the beam of the protector's flashlight. "It's over," I said, stepping back. "Go on, deny it." The protector's voice was calm, professional. "We have the file. Reference ID D472247. Your voice is clear. He looked between us, the recorder in the agent's hand, the roses framing the scene like judgment itself. His breath came fast, shallow. For the first time, I saw fear strip the pride from his face. The protector pocketed the device. "It's secure," he said quietly. "You did the right thing." "I hope so," I whispered, "because the truth smells like blood tonight." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of roses and rust. He stepped back, shaking his head as if denial could undo sound. "You think this changes anything?" "Yes," I said. "It changes who owns the silence." The garden seemed to exhale, a slow release of something long withheld. The petals brushed against one another in the breeze, faint as a sigh. The night didn't need witnesses. It already had proof. As he was led away, I knelt to the soil, brushing aside a fallen thorn. Beneath it, the recorder's light flickered once more, steady, pulsing like a heartbeat against the dark. This time, his voice would face judgment. I wrote with trembling hands but steady proof. Each word I placed on the page felt heavier than ink should allow. The legal counsel sat beside me, patient but precise, guiding my phrasing as though truth itself required translation. "Do not accuse," he said. "State, show. Let the evidence speak." His calmness steadied me more than prayer ever had. The affidavit listed everything, each falsified ledger entry, each veiled threat whispered in hallways that once carried hymns. I wrote of nights when fear sat at the foot of my bed like a loyal ghost. I wrote of the signature that wasn't mine, the $12,400 that disappeared, the forged dates that matched his hand too perfectly to be coincidence. Every line was a reckoning, signed not in faith, but in resolve. When I finished, the legal counsel slid the paper toward me. "Read it once more," he said. "You only get one chance to be heard without interruption." I read it aloud. My voice shook but did not break. The room was small, bare walls, a clock ticking above the file cabinet, but it felt like a courtroom. Each tick marked the distance between who I'd been and who I'd become. I paused when I reached the sentence that ended it all. "Let this record stand as my statement of truth." My hand hesitated before the signature line. "Do you believe they'll listen?" I asked. "They'll have to," he said. "It's signed, witnessed, and sealed." The pen glided, leaving behind my name in black ink. It wasn't just a name. It was the sound of silence breaking after too many years. I could feel the paper's texture under my palm, slightly rough, almost defiant. It reminded me that truth, when written, has weight. We enclosed the affidavit in a formal envelope stamped with the legal seal. The arbiter, my steadfast ally through the last inquiry, took it gently from my hands. "Once this leaves here," he said, "it starts a process you can't stop." "I don't want to stop it," I replied. "I just want it to mean something." He nodded. "Then we'll file it with the diocese by noon. Reference record L3108 will hold your statement. They'll have to open an internal review." I thought of the garden where his confession still lived on that recording. His voice, trembling with hatred, time-stamped 2247. The evidence sat safely in the protector's care, but this document, this was different. This was formal, institutional, impossible to bury without leaving traces. "Will they retaliate?" I asked quietly. "They'll deliberate," the arbiter said, "and delay. That's what they do first. But delay is the first crack in denial." He placed the envelope in a stack of official mail bound with twine. I watched as he added my affidavit to it. One voice among many, perhaps, but the only one with proof that breathed. The seal pressed down with a firm metallic stamp, its impression raised and cold. It looked like judgment itself. Outside, rain began to fall in faint, methodical strokes against the window. The scent of damp paper and ink filled the room. I thought of every sermon that spoke of truth setting one free. No one ever said freedom could smell like paperwork. As we left the office, the arbiter turned to me. "Do you know what this means?" It means I've stopped being afraid. It also means, he said, they'll start being careful. The courthouse clock struck 4, each chime echoing like punctuation to the years of silence. I clutched the carbon copy the counsel had given me. The thin sheet was still warm from the machine, its edges smudged faintly by my fingertips. Proof had a temperature, I realized. It cooled the longer you held it. Later that evening, I sat at my kitchen table, tracing the faint emboss of the diocesan letterhead beneath the top sheet. The light from the small lamp cast an oval glow across the page. I thought of Daniel, his laughter when he was a boy, his voice now preserved in confession. How does love rot into betrayal so quietly that you don't hear the decay until it speaks aloud? The arbiter called before dusk. "It's been logged," he said. "Already?" They set a hearing date. The rain carried his apology like static. It was late, too late for visits, too loud for peace. The storm drummed against the windows, each drop sharp as memory. I stood by the door, robe drawn tight, listening to the steady knocking that refused to die. When I opened it, he stood there, soaked through, hair plastered, face pale as guilt. His eyes searched mine, as though he could still bargain with blood. "They'll destroy me," he said. His voice was thin, trembling between defiance and despair. "You have to tell them. Say it wasn't me." Lightning flashed behind him, silvering the street. The umbrella in his hand was broken, ribs bent, fabric torn, a useless attempt at shelter. I could smell rain on his coat, cold and metallic. He looked smaller than I remembered, but the storm around him carried the same arrogance it always had. "Daniel," I said quietly, "you shouldn't be here." He laughed once, short, bitter. "You called the lawyers, the church, the police, and now you tell me not to come?" "I didn't call them," I said. "I told the truth. They listened." His eyes flicked toward the window, where thunder rolled and echoed through the glass. "They'll lock me out of everything," he whispered. "The estate, the parish, my name." "Consequences," I said, "are not exile. They're acknowledgement." He took a step forward, dripping water across the floorboards. "You think they'll protect you?" he asked. "They're using you. They'll hang me to save face." "Maybe," I said, "but I won't let you use me again." For a heartbeat he froze, then his tone softened. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I was angry. I said things I didn't mean. I thought—" He looked down, voice breaking. "I thought I could fix it." "You can't fix theft with confession," I said. "You fix it with repentance." He lifted his eyes, wet and pleading. "Then forgive me." My fingers tightened around the doorframe. "Forgiveness," I said, "isn't the same as trust." The air between us grew heavy, thick with the scent of rain-soaked earth. Behind him, the street lamp flickered, casting our shadows long and fractured across the floor. I saw his lips tremble, not from the cold, but from fear he couldn't name. "I don't want to lose you," he whispered. "You already did," I said. "The day you chose, lies over love." He swallowed hard, and for the first time, I saw it. Remorse. Not clean or pure, but raw, disoriented. It came too late to matter. A siren cut through the storm in the distance. The gatekeeper's car. He turned toward the sound. "You called them." "They called me," I said. "They said the restraining order was active, 72 hours. You shouldn't have come." He stepped back, shaking his head. "You didn't have to do this." "I did," I said, "because you wouldn't stop." The patrol car rolled to a halt at the curb, headlights scattering through the rain. The gatekeeper stepped out, coat lifted against the wind, carrying a folded document sealed in plastic. He approached slowly, his presence calm but absolute. "Mr. Raines," he said, voice level, "you violated a protective order. You need to leave now." Daniel stared at him, then at me. "You think this paper means anything?" "It means distance," I said. "Something you've never given me." The gatekeeper handed him the document. "This is a copy of the enforcement notice, effective immediately, 72 hours." Daniel's hand trembled as he took it. "You've turned the law against me," he muttered. "No," I said softly. I turned it toward me. He opened his mouth to speak, but the thunder drowned his words. His shoulders sagged under the weight of the moment, of everything undone. The rain seemed to pull him backward, urging him toward the street, away from the door he'd broken too many times, figuratively, once literally. He hesitated, then dropped the ruined umbrella by the steps. "I never wanted this," he said. "Neither did I answered. "But here we are." He turned away, walking into the storm. The gatekeeper watched until he vanished down the street, then handed me the folded notice. The paper was dry beneath its cover, but I could feel its weight through the plastic. Proof always carried temperature. It burned cold. "Keep your doors locked tonight," the gatekeeper said. "We'll patrol near the property until morning." I nodded, closing the door behind him. The latch clicked, and for the first time in months, it sounded final. I leaned against the wood, breathing in the faint scent of wet paper and iron rain. Compassion had always been my undoing, but tonight it met a boundary carved by law. I looked down at the umbrella, its ribs twisted beyond repair, water pooling beneath it like memory refusing to dry. Outside, the siren faded into distance. Forgiveness would wait for court. The walls hummed with paper and prayer. The hearing room was smaller than I imagined, too bright, too cold, too clean to carry the weight of what had happened. The fluorescent lights buzzed like restless thoughts, washing every face in pale indifference. I sat at the front table, a folder open before me, the pages trembling slightly under my fingertips. It wasn't nerves, it was anticipation. After months of silence, truth finally had a microphone. The judge entered, his robe whispering across the floor. The gavel struck once, sharp, absolute. Around me, the press leaned forward, pens hovering. The scent of ink and paper filled the air, familiar and heavy, like a promise. Somewhere behind me, I heard the witness clerk shift in his seat. That sound steadied me more than prayer. "Please state your purpose," the clerk at the desk said. "My purpose," I began, "is to ensure that records remember what people tried to forget." A ripple moved through the audience, papers shuffling, a cough, a camera click. The prosecutor nodded. "You've submitted multiple exhibits," he said. "Which would you like entered first?" I placed my hand over the folder. "The transcript," I said. "Reference entry T9A." He took it, flipping through the pages. The sound of paper against paper was louder than I expected. It reminded me of the nights I'd spent rereading those same words, hearing Daniel's voice trapped between lines of confession. The judge adjusted his glasses. "You'll read a portion for the record." My throat felt dry, but my voice did not waver. "Yes, Your Honor." I began. "Statement dated June 14th, recorded at 22:47. Speaker admits to falsifying signatures and concealing withdrawals totaling $12,400. Notes intent to manipulate ledgers to deflect scrutiny." The room was silent, except for the hum of the ceiling light. Every syllable seemed to echo longer than it should, as though the walls themselves were tired of secrets. The prosecutor leaned closer. "Do you confirm this recording originated from your personal device?" "Yes." "And that it was verified by the diocesan inquiry?" "Yes." "Did the accused dispute authenticity?" "No," I said softly. "He just called it a misunderstanding." A few reporters scribbled faster. The pen scratches sounded like rain on glass. I inhaled, steadying the tremor in my hands. "He said mistakes happen," I continued. "But signatures don't sign themselves, and money doesn't vanish by faith." The judge nodded slowly, making notes. His expression was unreadable, part sympathy, part distance. The microphone crackled, feedback slicing through the quiet like static. For a moment, it felt as though the system itself was resisting my words. I leaned in, repeating the last line louder. "Truth doesn't vanish by faith." The gavel struck again. "Maintain composure, please." "Yes, Your Honor," I whispered. but my pulse refused calm. The witness clerk caught my eye from the second row. He gave a subtle nod, the kind that says, "Keep going." I turned a page, the sound crisp, deliberate. "These aren't accusations," I said into the microphone. "They're verifiable records, and I will not let anyone rewrite them." The judge raised a brow. "This court will determine what is verifiable." "Then I trust the court will listen," I replied. The crowd murmured again, low and restless. Somewhere near the back, a reporter's camera flashed, freezing the moment. The folder, the gavel, the trembling, hand still resting on truth. I thought about how far that folder had traveled, from a church basement to an office desk to a courtroom where silence was finally being cross-examined. The prosecutor cleared his throat. "You mentioned sleepless nights," he said. "Were those related to threats or guilt?" I met his gaze. "Both. But guilt doesn't terrify you at midnight. Men do." He hesitated, caught between empathy and protocol. "Understood," he said. "No further questions at this stage." I exhaled slowly. The gavel came down once more, measured, almost kind. "Court will reconvene tomorrow," the judge said. "The accused will testify then." Chairs scraped. Reporters whispered. The sound was neither chaos nor calm, just the uneasy music of judgment approaching. The witness clerk gathered his notes behind me, murmuring, "You did well." "I told the truth," I said. "That's all I have left." As I stepped outside, the air hit colder than before. The courthouse steps glistened with the last traces of rain. Each drop reflected the fluorescent light from inside, the same harsh glow that had illuminated everything false. I thought of Daniel's face when he said he'd fix it, when lies still felt like control. I tightened my grip on the folder. The city seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the rest of the story. Somewhere deep inside, a vow formed quietly, without words, without forgiveness. Tomorrow, his truth meets mine on record. They called my name through the loudspeaker. The sound carried across the nave, low and official, echoing against the stone arches like a summons. My pulse quickened, not from fear, but from recognition. I'd waited too long for this moment. The church was full, rows upon rows of parishioners packed beneath the chandeliers, their eyes lifted not to heaven, but toward the stage. The air felt thick with expectation, a strange fusion of reverence and judgment. I stepped forward. The microphone on the podium waited like an open wound. Its wire trailed down into the sea of cables and cameras. I could feel the heat of the lights above, the way their glow fractured into shards along the polished marble floor. Every fragment of brightness seemed to demand that I stay standing. "State your name for the record," the moderator said. I spoke it clearly. The sound vibrated in my chest, steadier than I felt. Behind me, the protector adjusted the audio feed, ensuring the broadcast reached the 200 watching inside and the countless others streaming beyond the walls. The broadcast log would later record 214 verified attendees, numbers, proof, evidence that truth had finally found witnesses. The priest began the proceedings, his tone both formal and trembling. "This assembly," he said, "has been called to reconcile faith with fact. We gather not to punish, but to reveal." His words landed heavy. In faith, revelation often meant salvation. Today, it meant exposure. The recording was placed on the table beside me, a small black device marked with reference entry L47C, the same one that had caught his voice in the garden, the same one that held every syllable he tried to bury. The protector nodded once, waiting for my signal. I gave it. A soft click, then static. And then, his voice. "You should have died with him." The room gasped. A few hands went to mouths, some to rosaries. The chandelier's crystals trembled from the air shift, scattering flecks of light across the pews. I stared at the candle beside the altar, its flame motionless, its shadow pulsing faintly on the wall. It felt like it was watching too. The priest closed his eyes as the rest of the confession played. Every lie, every theft, every manipulation, it was all there. The laughter, the mockery, the certainty that no one would believe me. But now his own words betrayed him, amplified through Faith's very microphone. When it ended, silence swept through the hall, pure, unbroken, heavy as stone. I could hear the faint hum of the speakers cooling, the rustle of programs in shaking hands. "He denies the intent," the moderator said quietly. "He spoke it himself," I replied. "Intent doesn't need denial when it's recorded." The priest looked at me, then toward Daniel. He stood in the crowd, rigid, pale, eyes wide with disbelief. "Do you wish to respond?" the priest asked. Daniel shook his head, lips pressed tight. "It was private," he muttered. "It was anger, not truth." "Anger is truth without disguise," I said. "You just hate how it sounds out loud." He turned toward me, his voice rising. "You've twisted everything." The crowd murmured again, voices clashing like waves. Cameras tilted forward. Someone whispered, "It's him, the nephew." The word spread fast, faster than prayer. The protector stepped closer, his presence grounding. "Let the record show," he said evenly. "This testimony matches the digital verification on file." He handed the document, a broadcast entry certified with timestamp and ID, to the clerk at the front row. The gavel struck once for silence. The priest lifted his gaze. "Faith cannot hide from truth," he said, "even when truth hurts the faithful." A single candle flickered beside him, its flame bending under the tension. Light and shadow danced across Daniel's face, revealing every fracture, every denial cracking into something real. I could almost hear his thoughts struggling against the walls of consequence. He looked back at me, eyes glassy, lips trembling. "You've ruined me," he whispered. "No," I said softly. "You recorded your own ruin." For a heartbeat, time froze. The room still, the crowd hushed, the air electric with reckoning. Then, in a sudden flash of movement, he reached for the microphone. The protector stepped forward, but not fast enough. Daniel grabbed it, his knuckles white, his breath sharp. "This isn't justice," he shouted. "This is vengeance dressed in light." His words echoed through every speaker in the hall, raw and desperate. He looked around, waiting for someone, anyone, to stand with him. No one did. Even the priest lowered his head. The silence that followed was unbearable. He exhaled, eyes wild, and in a single motion, dropped the microphone. The sound hit like thunder, the feedback shrieking through the chamber. The candle flame shuddered, nearly died, then steadied again. He turned and ran down the aisle, pushing past the crowd as they parted, stunned and wordless. I didn't move. I just watched him disappear beneath the fractured light, his shadow fading into the doorway's glow. Somewhere behind me, the broadcast light blinked red. Still recording, still alive. Faith had met justice under full illumination. He dropped the microphone and ran. By dawn, they'd nailed paper where my shame once hung. The morning was quiet, too quiet for what it carried. The church doors loomed tall and still, their wood darkened by dew. I could see the fresh notice from a distance, pale against the oak, trembling faintly in the early wind. For months, that same door had been a witness to rumor, to stares, to silence that burned deeper than words. Now, the paper shivered there like redemption written in ink. The gatekeeper stood beside me, keys clinking softly at his belt. "It's official," he said. "Council approval under record number 457B. His voice carried the tone of ceremony, measured, reverent, tired. I stepped closer. The texture of the notice was rough under my fingertips, the ink raised where the seal had been pressed too hard. I traced the embossed line of the church emblem, its edges uneven. The paper felt alive, as if justice itself had texture. Beneath the formal words lay a single sentence. "By unanimous decision, Daniel Raines is hereby excommunicated from the parish, effective immediately." The name looked smaller on paper than it had in my life. A few townspeople gathered nearby, pretending not to stare. Their whispers moved like wind through dry grass. Familiar, restrained. I remembered the same crowd months ago, when that door had carried my humiliation. Back then, I had stood where he now would. The symmetry of it felt cruel and sacred all at once. The gatekeeper sighed. "Strange how things turn," he murmured. "Not strange," I said quietly. "Just slow." The sun began to break through the clouds, scattering light across the churchyard. It hit the edges of the notice, making the seal glimmer like something holy. I caught the faint smell of paper and wax mixing with the chill of morning air. It reminded me of waiting rooms and verdicts, places where truth was never kind but always precise. He leaned closer, reading aloud. "Removal from all duties, privileges, and protections of the parish. Cause, verified breach of trust, falsification of records, and conduct unbecoming of ministry." He stopped, eyes scanning the bottom line. "Filed and affirmed by the Church Council, gatekeeper witness present." He smiled faintly. "That would be me." "And I was the accusation he thought would never hold," I said. The moment stretched, filled with echoes of sermons past. I remembered his laughter under the same archway, the way he would clasp shoulders, smile wide, speak of faith as if it were currency, how easily he'd bought their trust, how quickly he'd lost it. Now, the notice nailed above his reflection was the debt finally collected. "Will he see it?" I asked. "He already has," the gatekeeper replied. "He came before sunrise, didn't say a word, just stood there." "And?" "He left his ring on the steps." We both looked down. The ring still lay there, half buried in dust. It caught the light weakly, like something unwilling to shine. I didn't pick it up. Some things weren't meant to be held again. The gatekeeper crossed himself, his voice low. "May mercy follow him." I nodded. Mercy, maybe, but not return. Behind us, a small group of parishioners gathered to read the notice. No one spoke his name aloud. The same tongues that once spread gossip now mouthed prayers for distance. The silence felt cleaner than sound. I stepped back and looked at the door, the nail hammered firm, the paper fluttering against it like a flag declaring peace after too long a war. "It feels final," I said. "It is," he answered. "He's not on the records anymore. It's done." But nothing ever truly ends in one morning. The echo of his deceit still lingered in corners of memory, in ledgers, in empty pews, in the part of me that still waited for the other shoe to fall. Yet standing there, I felt something release inside. The ache had shape now, and a signature. The gatekeeper folded his hands. "You can rest now," he said. "I'm not sure I know how," I admitted. "Then start small," he smiled, "one quiet morning at a time." The breeze picked up, lifting the edges of the notice. It rustled softly, like pages turning at the end of a long, brutal chapter. I let my hand rest briefly on the door, wood against skin, history against flesh, and then turned to leave. The bell tower began to chime, slow and deliberate, marking the hour like punctuation on a truth too long delayed. The gatekeeper called after me, "What will you do next?" I looked once more at the door, the nail, the faint shimmer of morning light. "Live," I said, "and let the record stay." The churchyard fell quiet again. Even the whispers faded, leaving only the sound of wind against the hanging notice. Justice had finally chosen its place. Visible, tangible, undeniable. He was no longer one of us. Debts, even moral ones, demand exact totals. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Air-conditioned justice humming through metal vents, the kind that stripped sentiment from everything. Papers shuffled like whispers behind me. Across the table, Daniel's lawyer cleared his throat, voice neutral, rehearsed. "As agreed," he said, sliding a certified check toward the arbiter. "Total sum of $38,600, full restitution and costs." The sound of the envelope scraping the polished table carried more weight than his words. Numbers, not apologies, had replaced everything else. The arbiter examined the check with the slow precision of someone who'd seen too many false reconciliations. "Audit lines," he said at last. "Amount verified." His signature moved across the page in deliberate strokes, the pen's tip catching faintly on the grain. I found myself staring at the ink trail. It glistened before it dried, as if even paper hesitated to hold this final act. When he turned it toward me, I didn't reach for it immediately. I let my eyes trace the embossed numerals, the faint texture of the watermark beneath my fingertips. It felt brittle, official, irreversible. The past had an amount now, and it was payable. Daniel sat across from me, shoulders drawn, gaze fixed somewhere near the floor. He looked smaller without his certainty. The suit he wore was immaculate, but his hands betrayed him, nervous, trembling just enough to make the cufflinks rattle. "You got what you wanted," he muttered. "No," I said quietly. "Just what was owed." The arbiter's pen clicked shut. The sound echoed like punctuation. "The agreement is sealed," he said. "Case closed." He nodded once to the clerk, who gathered the documents into a leather folder marked reference ID L93B. The seal pressed against it left a faint ring, like the memory of a weight. Outside the window, the city stretched gray and endless. I counted the seconds between the sweep of clouds and the flare of sun that occasionally broke through. 18 seconds of light, then shadow again. Time, too, had its balance. He spoke once more, softer this time. "You think this settles anything?" "It doesn't have to," I said. "It just stops the bleeding." A quiet settled over the room, the kind that comes when both sides know words can't change what's written. The arbiter folded his glasses, placing them neatly on the ledger beside him. "Justice isn't peace," he said, almost to himself. "It's only arithmetic." The check lay there between us, a white square of finality. I thought about everything it represented. The hours, the lies, the broken vows, turned into accounting entries. How faith had become receipts. How guilt could be itemized. The irony was almost divine. The gatekeeper had told me once, long before the hearings began, that closure rarely arrives as a miracle. It comes as paperwork. He was right. The miracle, if any, was that I could sit in the same room as the man who'd ruined everything and not tremble anymore. I reached for the check at last. The paper was stiff, cold from the air. My thumb caught on the embossed lettering of the bank's seal, raised lines forming a symbol that meant completion. The ink was dry, but still dark, as though it refused to fade. "You'll deposit it?" the arbiter asked. "In time," I said. "Not today." Daniel exhaled, long and low. "So this is forgiveness?" "No," I said. "This is math." The corner of his mouth twitched, a grim, almost smile that never fully arrived. "You win," he whispered. I shook my head. "There's no winning here, only reckoning." He looked away then, the way people do when their reflection begins to look back at them. His lawyer began packing documents, avoiding eye contact with us both. The room's hum grew louder, machines and systems resetting to neutrality, as though nothing sacred had happened at all. The arbiter stood. "We're adjourned." Chairs scraped, footsteps echoed. The door opened, letting in a rush of hallway noise, phones ringing, someone laughing too loudly, the ordinary swallowing the extraordinary. I lingered. The folder now sat sealed on the table, a ledger of the damage done and accounted for. I touched it once before leaving. The texture of the cover felt strangely like the church door that had once carried his notice, rough, real, final. Outside, sunlight hit my face, and for a fleeting second, the world felt evenly weighted. The air smelled faintly of metal and dust, the way mornings do after rain has dried. I thought of all that had been lost, faith, family, years, and how something as small as ink and paper could outlast them all. As I walked away, the check folded neatly inside my coat, I realized that forgiveness isn't earned by currency. It's just the silence that follows when everything else has been counted. The ink outlasted our bloodline. Silence returned, but it carried memory's scent. The river behind the house moved slow, steady, like time refusing to rush anymore. Its rhythm became my measure for the day. I'd wake to the sound of water touching stone and breathe in the faint scent of lavender from the candle on the table. Every small sound mattered now. The chairs creak, the kettles hiss, the low hum of distance. Even silence had texture here. The witness ran the grief group every Thursday evening. She never called it therapy. She said it was remembering aloud. The first time I went, the chairs were arranged in a rough circle. Uneven, mismatched, but honest. The candlelight made the space seem smaller, almost tender. "You don't need to speak," she told me quietly. "Just being here counts." That first night, I didn't. I listened. The stories came like waves, breaking one after another. A husband lost, a friend betrayed, a faith tested. Each confession dissolved into quiet nods and trembling breaths. When it ended, she passed me a membership form, its edges soft from handling. "It's not about belonging," she said. "It's about being allowed to stay." At home, I placed the form beside the candle. The ink from my signature bled slightly, as if the paper wasn't ready to hold new beginnings. Healing, I realized, had paperwork too. Days folded into each other, simple and deliberate. I mended what I could, small acts of repair. I fixed the loose hinge on the chair by the window, polished the old brass handle that once belonged to my mother's dresser. Some afternoons I'd walk along the riverbank, counting the ripples that caught the light. 38 steps from door to shore, always the same. Exact, grounding. One morning, the witness stopped by. She brought tea and a thin booklet of meeting notes. "You're quiet, but steady," she said. "That counts more than people think." "Quiet is easier now," I replied. "Or maybe," she smiled, "it's just kinder." She looked around the room. The chair, the single candle, the faint trace of lavender in the air. "You've built peace with your hands," she said softly. "Maybe," I said, "but it still feels borrowed." She placed a hand on the table. "Peace always does. That's how we know it's real." After she left, I sat for a long while, listening to the sounds the world made when no one was speaking. The river's flow, the ticking of the old clock, the rustle of leaves tapping the window pane. In that stillness, memory didn't accuse anymore. It lingered like the scent of something once burned, but now cool. The nights were easier, too. I'd light the candle each evening, its flame calm and steady, and watch the shadows stretch gently across the wall. Sometimes I imagined the faces that used to haunt me. Daniels, the arbiters, the gatekeepers, all fading into light instead of anger. The lavender soothed the air, faint but certain. "Do you ever stop missing?" I asked aloud once, the question falling into the quiet. The room didn't answer, but the river outside whispered something close. Maybe it was, no, maybe not yet, but it felt enough. At the group the following week, the witness asked everyone to share one vow for the future. When it was my turn, I hesitated, then said, "To stop surviving and start remembering gently." No one clapped. No one needed to. That's how truth behaves. It just settles. Later that night, I returned home, placed the membership form in a drawer, and sat in the chair by the window. The candle flickered once, its flame reflecting in the glass. I thought of everything that had led here, the hearings, the notice, the restitution, the silence that came after justice. All of it had turned into something smaller, quieter, more livable. The lavender scent deepened as the wax melted, soft and floral, mixing with the river's damp air. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and for the first time in years, I didn't brace for anything. Peace sounded almost believable. I buried old thorns and planted mercy. The soil was colder than I remembered, but softer too, as if time itself had sifted through, loosening what once clung too tightly. I dug with my hands, not the spade. The texture grounded me, cool and forgiving. It felt right to start again here, where everything once ended. The garden had seen truth, betrayal, judgment. Now it would learn gentleness. The city finally approved the reopening 2 weeks ago. The permit slip, stamped and folded in my pocket, was more than paper. It was permission to breathe again. The protector stopped by that morning, balancing coffee in one hand and a tray of rose seedlings in the other. "You're really doing this," he said. "I have to," I replied. "This ground deserves better stories." He crouched beside me, watching as I pressed the first seedling into the earth. The scent of fresh soil mixed with the faint trace of coffee steam. For a moment, the world felt suspended, quiet, yet alive. "You could have moved anywhere," he said. "Started fresh somewhere untouched." I smiled. "But mercy doesn't grow on clean ground. It needs the dirt that remembers." Children from the community center arrived soon after, their laughter breaking the silence that once reigned here. They ran between the half-built beds, chasing one another around the fence posts. Someone shouted, "It smells like rain and flowers!" It did. Hope had a scent again. The protector joined me on the bench near the gate, the same one Daniel had used when he rehearsed his sermons. I looked at the worn wood, its surface smooth from years of restless hands. "You think he'd hate this?" I asked. "Maybe," he said with a quiet grin. "Or maybe he'd pretend not to." I chuckled, surprising myself. Pretending was his favorite ritual. He handed me the last rose seedling. Its stem was thin but strong, small thorns curling near the base. "Be careful," he warned. "I'm done bleeding for him," I said softly, lowering it into the earth. The soil crumbled easily, warm under the afternoon sun. A group of volunteers began painting the new signboard. Community Garden, Renewal Project. I noticed how their voices overlapped, gentle and ordinary. That was the miracle, ordinary life returning where ghosts once spoke louder. The protector handed me the clipboard with the final approval attached. "Keep this," he said. "Record ID 713B. Official proof it's yours." I traced the embossed seal at the bottom. The texture caught slightly under my finger, reminding me of the notice they once nailed to the church door. Paper, soil, ink, each held memory differently, but all demanded touch to feel real. "You've done more than reopen a garden," he said. "I just stopped letting pain be the only thing that grows." The afternoon light softened over the rows of soil. The scent of roses began to drift faintly through the air, not yet strong, but enough to promise what would come. I found myself whispering, "This is how faith returns, not through sermons, but seasons." He nodded, standing. "You'll need rain soon." "It'll come," I said. "It always does." After he left, I stayed alone for a while, hands still dirty, heart unexpectedly light. The garden hummed with small sounds, the rustle of leaves, the squeak of a wheelbarrow, the wind threading through new growth. Each noise was a kind of forgiveness, each breeze a soft reminder that living things bend before they heal. I looked toward the far corner where the old tree still stood. Beneath it lay the roots of every confession ever made here, now feeding something honest. I pressed my palm into the soil, feeling the pulse beneath. "Grow well," I whispered. "Grow better than we did." The sun began to lower, gold across the ground, catching on each petal, each tool, each quiet proof that endings can become beginnings. My reflection stretched long beside the flowers, almost blending into them. The wind carried the scent of roses once more, faint, resilient, clean. I closed my eyes and let it settle over me, the way peace sometimes does. Unnoticed until it's everywhere. Faith had roots again. He tore the Bible once. I closed it myself today. The church smelled of wax and cedar, the kind of scent that carries both mourning and grace. Sunlight filtered through the high windows, dust turning gold in the beams. I stood by the altar, holding the same Bible he once ripped from my hands, its torn edge now mended with careful stitching. My fingers traced the seam, rough but whole. Nothing perfect ever survives, I thought, but some things endure anyway. The choir began softly, voices rising like breath after silence. "Blessed be the quiet heart." I had chosen the hymn myself, a final offering, a peace between what we were and what we became. The melody trembled through the rafters, familiar yet strange. The arbiter stood beside the memorial book, reading from a list of names restored to the church registry. Mine was among them again. The ink, fresh and dark, shimmered under the light. "Restored in good faith," he said quietly, and for once the phrase didn't sound ceremonial, it sounded human. I took a slow breath. "It's done then?" He nodded. "Yes, officially, completely. You kept your vow." "And him?" I asked. "He'll rest with the others. Record entry A47 closed." The number felt final, not cold. I looked toward the pews, half filled with faces I barely recognized. Neighbors, church members, even the children who now helped tend the garden by the river. The witness sat near the back, her hands folded around a candle. The protector leaned beside the door, nodding once when our eyes met. Quiet solidarity. When the service began, I opened the Bible to the same page Daniel had, torn, the passage about mercy outlasting judgment. The page was patched, but the words still stood. "Forgiveness," I read, "is not forgetting. It is planting what might bloom again." The sound of my voice filled the space, steady where once it had cracked. I remembered his voice from years ago, angry, desperate, shouting scripture as weapon. "No one erases me!" he had screamed. But time had already done that. Not erased. Softened. I closed the book slowly. "And yet," I whispered, "we all fade, just differently." The arbiter handed me a small candle, its wick already lit. "For the record," he said, "light carries forward." I placed it on the altar beside the memorial cross. The flame leaned toward the open window, caught in a gentle draft. A faint echo of the organ swelled, then dimmed. One by one, people rose to leave. The choir's final note lingered, suspended like breath between prayer and release. The protector approached before stepping out. "You did what many can't," he said. "I didn't win," I replied. "I just stopped fighting." He smiled faintly. "That's what winning looks like sometimes." When everyone was gone, I remained a while longer. The candles flickered along the aisle, small halos of persistence. The light on the open Bible seemed alive, gold pooling between verses. I reached out, closed it gently, and rested my hand on its cover. Outside, the bells began to toll. 3 slow chimes. Through the doors, I saw the river glinting beyond the courtyard, the same water that once reflected grief now shimmering with quiet motion. Life continued, indifferent but kind. As I stepped out, the arbiter called from behind, "We'll keep your entry open for good measure." "No need," I said, turning back with a small smile. "Let the book close where it belongs." The sun hit my face, warm and unflinching. The air carried faint traces of lavender from the memorial wreaths. The sound of the hymns still hovered somewhere, softer now, like a memory rewriting itself. I walked down the stone path toward the gate, where the wind caught the last notes of the choir and carried them over the garden wall. For the first time in years, there was no weight on my chest, just the quiet hum of peace settling in, some secret save what truth alone could never mend.